Welcome to the It's Time podcast with your host, Professor Dale Feinauer, from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.
Welcome to another It's Time podcast, an offering of the UW-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs. I'm your host, Dale Feinauer. Once again, we're here at A.J. Armstrong Studios to help throw a little more fuel on the flame of your desire to enhance your business management skills. Today, as all of this first season, we're focused on leadership. I'm excited today to have with us Steve Weinert. Steve is the owner, manager of Crafts Roofing and a friend, which makes this a little bit more fun. Steve, could you tell us a little bit about what you do and what's Crafts Roofing? What do you do at the company?
Crafts Roofing is an industrial and commercial roofing contractor based out of Manitowoc, servicing northeastern Wisconsin. This means that you're going to at some point experience what we do, the dry space that we protect, but it's going to be someplace like when you go out shopping, you're at the hospital, at a school, or maybe the foods that are being prepared for you. We're not going to come do your house. We're going to do the bigger buildings. I guess I bear the ultimate responsibility there at the moment. So I'm the last one to get kicked when there's something that needs to be sorted out.
And you're second generation. Your father was in that role.
I'm actually third generation.
Third generation.
Third generation.
Kind of an important legacy to have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Well, tell us about you, your life. What's transpired to make you the leader you are today?
I grew up around the business, but that was never originally my intent. So basically, when high school finished, I disappeared, did things like, I was in the Army for a while, went to school overseas, did graduate work overseas, ran shoe plants and travel trailer plants.
Well, let's hit a couple of those. You're in the military. Anything you learned from the military that relates to leadership?
A lot. I was very, very fortunate. I both studied and worked underneath some really good people who believe that if you use the right tools, you can help people. And I think that really applies to leadership. Even though the military is a bit of a command-orientated structure, we were in a position where we couldn't do that. We had to coerce, or we had to inspire or quietly suggest that, hey, this might be a lot better for you if we did it this way. In a retrospect, when I look back at that, I got a lot of early lessons that way.
From the folks that you
worked for. And I was in a little two-person unit in Germany, doing counterintelligence work. It was really a very neat experience.
And any other leadership lessons that you took away from that? A
lot of what not to do.
Go on. Those can be the biggest learnings.
Those are really things where you saw people issued orders or directed to do things. They might have begrudgingly did it, but you could see that the motivational side was not working. The results were going to be minimal rather than maximal. And basically they were doing it with all their heart into it. So when something came off the rails, they immediately pointed, well, you ordered me to do that.
So too strong a focus on the command side, you will do this because I told you to, you found wasn't a good leadership approach.
Not in a regular sort of day-to-day leadership situation. Just doesn't work.
Okay. And then the next thing you did was you went to school overseas.
I went to school actually while I was in the service, did an undergraduate in business management and computers. It was University of Maryland, but I've never been to the campus. So I did through their Heidelberg, Germany campus, and then briefly moved to Spain and then to Britain, where I did an MBA in production management. There I ran a travel trailer plant, kind of another neat thing. I was supposed to help them computerize this travel trailer plant. And the day I started, they said, our general works director, he had a nervous breakdown. He can't come back for a couple months. So we looked at your resume. You're the new works manager. So suddenly I'm building things again, which was really pretty cool.
Did it make you a little nervous stepping into a job where the person who had it before had a nervous breakdown?
Oh yeah. And I really wanted to know why. And the company was a little bit dysfunctional, and I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure that out. That particular company ran on the rocks after I had left, which was predictable. And I had enough of an insight on it that I was actually offered, did I want either a chunk of it or what the people who were sorting it out, they wanted me to come run it. But I wanted to finish my graduate work, and I had to decline that at that time.
How else did you decide that wasn't the right career move for you? That's an interesting opportunity to be given, but how do you decide it's not the right opportunity for you?
I felt in this case that the systemic difficulties were dug so deeply that the only way I think it could have really been sorted out would have been to break it apart and put it back together in a way that with the outside investors looking over my shoulder, I would never have been allowed to do. So I would have sort of been asked, could you please run this racetrack like a horse, but we're leaving the hobbles on. And so, try and set a new record, but, at the same time, you can't actually stride out. It eventually was, which was somewhat predictable. It was acquired by a larger competitor. The product line still exists. The plant, I don't know at this stage if it's still there or not. At the end of the production management MBA, I selected among a number of different offers and ended up working for K Shoes, which is part of the Clark's group of shoemaking companies. Just a little part of the thing. We only had 4,500 employees out of the worldwide group. So it was...
But still a substantial operation.
Mm-hmm. And I was given a group of 4 factories to go cut my teeth on. And that was a lot of fun. I really
Why was it fun?
We were making something tangible. In our case, the particular division I had, we took fashion, women's fashion. So we go to like places like Dusseldorf or whatever and watch the fancy models strut, these really great shoe designs on the stage so everyone could see, and reinterpret it so that professional women could wear this shoe day in, day out. They could actually go to work in the shoe. They could go out and enjoy themselves with it. And so we were taking these themes and making them viable. In many cases, like we all get these car magazines, and you see these really super like race cars sort of things. And you're like, well, how would that work? Let's say here in Wisconsin, in the winter, probably not so much. So what we did is we made it into the ones that you could still feel inspired about, but they actually work day to day.
Talk to me about the leadership analysis of that. How did you come to the conclusion that that was a logical niche for you to go after?
It was production orientated. Most of the other ones I was, other offers I had at that time were either a traveling consultancy, and I didn't feel it was very viable to be a consultant without the experience behind it. That's something, even in the military, they would constantly offer, like, would you like to join the teaching cadre here? And you're like, but I haven't really gone and done this. I just did really well in your course, so maybe this isn't the right way to do that.
Right.
So I went to felt confident about it. But then I liked the people. It was really pretty neat. I didn't realize how messed up they were. Because when we first moved there, I told my wife after the first week there, I said, maybe we should just rent for a while. Let's not buy a house. And in Britain, you usually buy a house. I mean, that's normal. And she's like, why? And I'm like, well, the last 4 or 5 guys who had this position lasted about 6 months. And they either threw in the towel or were given the hee-ho. And, but it was really pretty easy. The people wanted to do it. They just needed someone to help square them out. So it was a lot of fun. It really was a lot of fun.
Talk to me about that. The people wanted to do it. So how did you approach leadership to help them be successful?
I started listening to them and listening and listening instead of coming in and saying, first of all, I was the foreigner. So, here I am, the American. I mean, I would have people say things to me like, have you ever been shot? And you're like, what? Well, all they see is our detective shows, they see Starsky and Hutch or whatever. So they all think that we run around with great big, Magnum PI pistols and shoot each other and things like this. And so I had this whole stereotype thing. So it was better for me to just be quiet and listen. The group of factories had underperformed mostly because the previous leaders were fighting for their career lives more than they were fighting for the factories. And they weren't listening to them. Instead, they were directing them. And when the leadership from above would say, take out this process because it costs too much money and we want to save money, they would just blindly do it rather than evaluating it. I actually stuck some processes back in that had been taken out because the math was simple. It cost 2.5 pence per pair to do this operation. And the end savings was about 15 pence a pair. It was like no brainer math. And I would constantly get in trouble for that. But this group of factories that had been underperforming, within about 8 months, we were at the point where we were above target. Our returns, which is important in making leather footwear, because you're dealing with organics, you're dealing with stuff that can burst when you last it over or whatever, was less than half of what was expected or budgeted. And I really had a blast. It was really a lot of fun.
You had described the people who'd been there before unsuccessfully as fighting for their careers versus fighting for the organization, for organizational growth. Talk about that distinction.
I believe that my predecessors, and I only got to meet one of them, but I believe that they mostly had a typical corporate zero-sum approach to how they worked, and that you didn't get ahead unless you stabbed a few people along the way, and you spent an awful lot of time making sure you weren't stabbable, that sort of thing. I figured that if, as an outsider, if I was going to float in this sea at all, I needed some help. And the only people I could really count on were the people in the plants. And so I went through the effort to learn how to grade leather, how to run most of the equipment. I didn't wear them today, but I made quite a few pairs of my own shoes in the experimental factory. And then I would go in and take them in and ask advice of the people who were making them. I also realized that these small factories were so interconnected. I wouldn't say they all shared exactly the same DNA, but there was always so many sets. They were small places, and there was piecework. So the inspectors who would grade your productivity, because the piecework was affected both by the volume you put out and the quality you put out.
Okay.
Well, the quality side had slipped terribly because the inspectors were at best second or third cousins, maybe closer. Maybe they were like a nephew or an aunt or whatever who was the inspector. And you normally don't ding your relatives by grading them down. So I started rotating those inspectors and then having so much of the work re-inspected a second time by people I could trust. And then I would occasionally take a small percentage and have them brought into my office and look at them, which liberated them in a way that they could actually say, Aunt Bessie, the way you're doing this is not working. And if you line it up on the little marks instead of like kind of what you think it is, we would get better quality and we'd all win. And I put up scoreboards for them. So how many lines that each production line made, and what the quality ratio was on that. And then I wasn't allowed to give a whole lot of incentive beyond just scorekeeping, but I tried to do what I could. So I got them to work in the same direction.
I'm hearing two things. One is you wanted to work collaboratively with your people. You wanted to get to know them. You wanted them to be collaborators with you to make good things happen in the organization. But I'm also hearing that you amped up the accountability and making sure people were held accountable for quality, for quantity, that the inspector wasn't your aunt who could simply pass you by. How do you balance those two?
I made the accountability mostly to themselves.
Go on.
All right, let's say you and I, we go out in the driveway. It's summertime. There's a basketball hoop and there's a basketball. So we start throwing some hoops. What's probably going to happen? We're going to start playing
you're
horse.
6'something. I'm 5'11" and poorly coordinated. You're going to get a whole lot more baskets in than me. That's what's going to happen.
Well, we'll probably end up doing free throws or going around, and we'll probably play horse.
Okay.
And because we're competitive and we're going to score,
Absolutely.
We're going to score. Well, I let them play horse among themselves. If I held them accountable, that was management. But let's give the lines different colors. If the red line was outproducing the blue line, there was like bragging rights. There was when they all went to the Old Mill pub after work that they would, like, hey, did you notice that for the past month, like we've blown you folks away? Sort of bragging rights there.
So you created
where they were competing against each other.
An incentive, competing against each other to see if they could achieve these organizational objectives, quality, volume, etc. And you instilled that, within the organization.
Also, I tried to combine any place where they were externally graded by management to where they all shared it. So they couldn't like pass a problem off to some of the things split between plants, and that was a game they would play, and they couldn't do that anymore. It was like, no, you were all on the Style Juliet production line. You all get graded for it together.
So you modified the process and the evaluation
to make
processes
that
get
there weren't silos that were fighting against each other.
Okay. Interesting. And now a few words about some of the programs and services offered by the UW-Oshkosh College of Business.
The Master of Business Administration program at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh is strategically designed to provide high-quality instruction in an understandable and applicable format. In many cases, the program takes a team teaching approach, where award-winning faculty are paired with industry experts to provide balanced coverage of advanced business concepts. Faculty present course material from an academic perspective, and industry experts illustrate how the material applies in the professional world. Learn more about UWO's no GMAT required results-driven curriculum at uwo.sh/MBA and position yourself for your next opportunity. That's uwo.sh/MBA. It's time to achieve more.
Well, how would you describe your leadership style?
I guess I look at leadership is that first I want to do by example. So I do try on the roofing side. We're industrial roofers. I had earned a journeyman card in roofing before I ever came back to work on any part of management. So I had the hands-on skills. If we were doing training, even if it meant getting the trainer to spend a little extra time with me, I made sure I could master the skills so that, even though I'm supposedly sitting in an office someplace, I'd come out with them while they're training and work at it. And I'm like, I can do this.
And you knew how to do the roofing.
And I was going to do it just so that I had a rapport. So we were talking from the same level. And then I guess I would take my style then as I'm going to, you've got me talking, but more often you'll find me listening and then asking somebody like yourself, let's say you were working in our team, well, what do you think? What are your suggestions for this problem you just laid out? And then helping them go through the process of evaluating what's the best solution. Because if I tell them, I want to get that resentment back, I'm going to get that heartless compliance back. But if
no ownership.
But if they own it, if they're like, yeah, I think we should, put the big tires on all this bit of equipment and go to all flotation tires on this type of situation or something like this, they own it. And they'll try and find a way to make it work, or they'll come back and say, that really didn't work. And we can all agree, let's not do that.
So you've tried to empower the staff to use their judgment to make decisions, even though in many cases, you know how to do the roofing. You could have come up with the answer, but you wanted them to, so they have ownership.
Probably better in that decade, there was a machine sitting on a shelf that I had bought. I had seen this out at a trade show and later looked at it at the factory and made it and said, this is the cat's meow. And so I bought a couple of them and tried to implement them, and nobody wanted it.
Why?
They hadn't envisioned it. Like anything, there was a little bit of a learning curve, and it failed. I mean, it was
Steve's piece of equipment, so they weren't into it.
I left that on the shelf as a reminder to myself until finally somebody talked me out of it and said they wanted it. I never could get our guys to adopt it. So I realized if they liked it, they would figure it out. They would allow themselves the learning curve, and they would make it work. So the next bit of equipment I saw that I liked like that, I said, okay, I'm going to try this a little different. Happened to be, it was going to be shown again at a trade show in Chicago. So I had two of the, one supervisor and one actual hands-on technician. You go down and look at this. This looked kind of interesting, but I don't know if it's going to work or not. And they came back and said, oh, we really think, can we get one of those? Well, I'll see if I can find some room in our budget for it. But I mean, we'll see if we can get. So I'm like, yeah, but we're going to have to give up a couple of things, which we didn't have to give up anything, but we're going to have to give up a couple of things to get it. We got it, and they've championed it. It's about motivation. They gotta wanna to, if they don't want to do it, it isn't going to happen.
All right. Interesting in this description, you had made a decision. You had bought this really cool piece of equipment. I do not doubt it was amazing, but given the way it had occurred, it wasn't being implemented. you dropped back, made an analysis, and changed at some level your leadership style in response. How that's self-awareness, that's self-reflection, that's self-development. How important are those kind of skills in becoming a good leader?
Very important. If you're only going to work from a command point, you're never going to step back, look at yourself, and say, how do I advance? How do I help my people by improving my skill sets?
Right.
I do a lot of reading. When we had some of the programs with UW Oshkosh, I spent a lot of time there, probably maybe more than business would have suggested have been prudent, both to give back a little bit in some cases, but also that I'm not done improving. I'm not,
You're not a finished product.
I am not a finished product. I know where my failings are. I've looked at those, the reminders, like that piece of machinery sitting on a shelf telling me that, if I don't do it right, it can still be the best thing since sliced bread. It's not going to happen.
It's interesting. There's also a certain humbleness in there that you want to keep your mistake to remind you and keep your mindset right.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to, it was a reminder. It was just a look in the mirror, look in the mirror and saying that, yeah, if I don't do this right, I failed them.
All right. You mentioned reading. You like to read. Any books that you've read, any concepts out of your reading that you think were particularly meaningful to you in your leadership approach?
I do a very diverse bit of reading. Everything from a few adventure type pulpers just to, should we say, entertain the mind a little bit, to some technical, and some of that technical is in our field. And then I will go through a lot of business type books. I've got one sitting right now on agile leadership. Happened to be, I went to school with the author. So I promised him that I'd read it, and then I'd write for him a personal review that if he can use it, he could use it. As I'm reading through it, I'm seeing some things that are useful. So I'm always going through this stuff, looking for, is there some tool that I can either use for myself or I can share from reading that sort of generalized literature. Some of the stuff that I really have enjoyed is I spent a period where I really searched out, what you would call business self-improvement type books, more because I wanted to hear where other people had gone. And books are a wonderful way for you to move forward quicker than bumbling around yourself. You can find someone else's experience. The negative experiences are just as useful as the positive experiences.
I've learned more from my mistakes than anything else.
And I really personally enjoy it when somebody, and appreciate it when somebody tells me, don't try that part, it hurts. That's bad. That's bad. That's going to cause you a lot of trouble.
I have those scars.
Yes. Or it might look good for a short period, but it's going to come back to haunt you. So don't try that.
Any book or two that you would recommend to a new leader as being something they might benefit from?
I didn't really think about that one. I'm dating myself a little bit. I always liked some of the initial Michael Porter books.
Yes.
The later ones I did not. I thought he was producing to contract later on. Some of the training materials that the Dale Carnegie people use,
yes,
are useful because they bring a lot of material that is otherwise spread out in a summary form.
Condense it.
In a condensed form. There's a different classmate of mine who wrote a book called The Black Belt in Marketing, which is the same thing. It's almost like a Reader's Digest level. It was a black belt in MBA or something like that. But it was like just a little teachable modules. I've actually written a little mini course that we taught our people off of.
Almost a Cliff Note version of all the stuff you ought to learn in an MBA.
Yeah, and it did lean a bit on the marketing side, but it was just to get the people to think about when they come and represent the company, what the bigger picture of that was, or your proposal's more than a price, all these type of things. And so we did that. We did another one on decision making that we created modules for and occasionally rotate our people through. We found people who were going to go off and Well, I'll use the classic example is that, they suddenly have a whole bunch of postcards they need to mail. Let's say about 30 or 40 of them. They're going to waste time to go down to the central post office, buy some postcard stamps because they're cheaper. And you have to set them down and say, no, wait a second. We're 30 minutes away from there. You're going to stand in line for 20 minutes to get them. And you're going to then spend that time back. So you're going to lose an hour no matter what, maybe a little bit more. And the savings is 8 cents or 10 cents or whatever it is.
Over 30 posts here, you got $2.40 here.
So this is like, just put the other stamps on and move along. Let's not do that. We found ourselves, we were doing some of this on equipment where the numbers were much bigger, is that we wanted to always find just the perfect tool for things. Particularly hand tools, we're like, no, we're not going to go and do this because the ROI on it's terrible. Is that use what we have, or in some cases, when you evaluate, it's like, why didn't we ever do that? Then make sure we always do it and have those in stock. And so we help them through that sort of bring it down to a smaller level of analysis so that they could figure out, is it a good, is the decision I'm making going to have a good result or not?
As a leader, how do you get your folks to focus on that bigger picture as opposed to the micro, those stamps are cheaper question?
Questions. Ask them questions. I found it a lot more useful to ask someone a question than to give them a direction.
So I'm hearing asking questions and listening repeatedly as being key aspects of the Steve Weinert School of Leadership.
It's worked for me. And again, it's amazing when you ask them questions, Dale. I have seen people who, in the middle of the discussion, let's say you and I were doing this and we're talking about whether or not we should get this bit of equipment or a different bit of equipment and what our strategy to be, that, and let's say I'm the person who's presented to you to review, and you're asking me the question, and suddenly I'd have the equivalent to me suddenly going, I got it. We're all good. I'll see you later. Because by talking it through, they suddenly realize it makes, their other alternatives made no sense. And there was a alternative that outranked the others, head and shoulders.
So I'm hearing listening, but I'm hearing discussion, and that collaborative analysis and decision-making is a way that you approach leading through these kind of decisions.
When you're working with students, do you find sometimes the ones, I'm sure you have ones that you can sort of look at them and say, I think they get it. But the ones who come and ask the right questions, you can suddenly tell they certainly have gotten it.
Yes.
Because now they're looking how to apply it.
Yes.
And so that I'm less worried about a wrong decision than wrong thinking, because we're all going to make some wrong decisions. But if we made them by not thinking or by wrong thinking, like selfish thinking or fearful thinking, we're going to repeat that. But if we made a wrong decision out of good logic, then sometimes you just have to dust off and, move along, that it didn't work out or thought that was good.
That's a critical distinction, that you separate out decisions that may be a mistake due to wrong thinking versus it was the wrong decision, but the thinking process behind it was solid.
If the thinking process behind it's solid, we have a chance to do the feedback cycle, the heuristics that correct
move it forward.
Right. Yeah.
And if the leader isn't thinking right, their analysis isn't good, it's selfish, it's any of those.
Then I'm probably going to be asking them about, hey, did you think about how this fits in the bigger picture? Do you think about the other people have to do this? Do you think, is this portable? The parts that would get them to try and pull in those other factors that they missed? Because there's no point in saying to them, you forgot about the other people and, their feelings are going to be hurt. You're better off to ask them is, how do you think the other people are going to feel about this? And is that going to build them up or is that going to push them down? And
back to the asking questions.
Asking questions. We've done this also on safety. And
yes.
So leadership and safety, we've changed it from, the thou shall sort of commandments of safety to where our goal is. And our goal is a safe workplace. And we've gotten tremendous results from that.
Do you find that there are sometimes people that no matter how much you ask the question, how much you motivate it, just don't get the importance of thinking through how this is going to be viewed from another's perspective?
And that happens. That truly happens. And there's then an evaluation you have to make whether they're somebody you can coach into the right direction, or if there's somebody who needs to find a different career.
And sometimes another career is the answer.
Sometimes another career can move them in a way that you would have hoped you could have done it, but it gives them that chance to restart. And so sometimes it's not even a bad thing. It's just they've painted themselves in a corner.
Interesting.
They've not allowed themselves enough room to grow or change into what you need them to do. I've never worried so much about letting somebody go or firing them, to use the conventional term. I dislike immensely. It's heartbreaking to me to lay people off.
So the termination decision I'm hearing could be a combination of they lack the ability to do the things that we need done, amplified by they've painted themselves into a corner and sort of their image within the organization. There's no way they can recover.
I've coached a couple of people that have ended up coming back saying, you got to go somewhere else for a bit because you've painted yourself in a corner. They're always going to see you as
X,
as this level, and you're not going to get to where you want to go. You're not going to influence others. You need to go find some growing room somewhere else.
So leave the organization. That's what's best for your career growth.
But if you want to come back, come and talk to us, because we can do this in a way that it's not a shut door.
All right.
And we've had some people that have gone out and the euphemism among my other managers is that, they grew up or they found their life and they come back and we've got people who are now in leadership roles that needed to do that.
That's interesting. So I could be working in your organization, struggling a bit. The organization comes to the conclusion, it's time for us to part ways and let me grow someplace else. But yet I could be welcome back in the organization in the future. Why would you hire somebody back who is a failure?
I guess the premise is you're always growing. We're not hiring their past, we're hiring their future.
Fascinating.
Think about bonuses.
Go on.
I mean, this is something where for a long time, I had this misconception that bonuses were rewards for past performance. That's only part of it. They're actually an organization spending money to try and gain the future performance, to try and ensure that there's a high likelihood that future performance will be repeated. And so the more it looks like you might be able to repeat those really great things that, you in your heart might feel you want to reward, the organizations will be like, if we give this guy money, he'll stay and we'll hopefully get this again.
So as you're managing rewards, you're looking at both a retrospective, what have they done, but what is this going to motivate moving forward?
And people grow through their whole lives. I can show you very successful hands-on tradesmen that have worked for us for decades, who, if they were judged harshly on their initial performance, would not be with us. In a couple of cases, they needed to go elsewhere. They came back and have done outstanding. They have leadership roles.
And I'm not going to go all the way to I'm an outstanding professor, but I do recall, this reminds me, one of the student evaluation instruction comments I had one of my first year teaching. Dale has the potential to become a good teacher. And you can't read that any other way than right now, boy, you're not with the program, but you've got the potential. So you're looking at that potential as much as you're looking at the current performance.
I've got a project manager who needed to go elsewhere for a bit. And he went to the big cities, did well there.
Right.
And then a couple of years later, called me up and said, is there any chance of coming back? Like, yeah, absolutely. Talk to me. What's going on?
Right.
Well, this and that, and I'm constrained, and they're just telling me what to do and instead of letting me grow and think about what to do. And he's worked out great.
So you've talked a lot about growth and a lot about things that you've done very consciously to try and enhance your skills as a leader. You think you were a born leader?
No.
No?
I never saw myself as that.
How did that happen then?
I'm not really certain, Dale. I really am not. I didn't see myself as that, but yet I had found in several cases where I was present when there was, let's say, an emergency sort of thing, is that I just got it done. And that really made me think about, well, I got all these people to do this stuff when there was a problem. And I'm talking like, let's say, I know in one case we found a bomb in Germany. initially they didn't want to take.
And that was a problem.
That was a big problem. That's a big problem. I really didn't. I did not want to come home in a baggie. Okay. So it was a big problem. I had spotted this, something was out of place. I was told, be quiet. You're just being annoying as usual and all this and that. Until I persisted. And then they eventually found it was a couple 100 kilos of explosives waiting to
go
do damage to us. And, but once I persevered and I saw, well, wait a second, if I stand up and I do this the right sort of way, I can get these people to do this stuff. I'm like, hey, that was pretty cool. That was really pretty cool. And I was in a couple first aid ones where that had to happen. And that kind of made me realize that, I could do that. Because I always saw myself maybe a little bit more as a technician than as a leader. But then when I realized if I can help people optimize themselves, that I'm doing a really good thing.
I've heard people say, maybe I'm hearing this here, that leadership can be kind of an addictive jazz, that once you've done it a couple times and, hey, we got rid of this bomb and I saw these people grow, that was kind of a cool thing. You wanted to do that again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I do, in my self-evaluation, I know that I'm better in a crisis situation or in setting up systems than I am in maintaining systems long run. But hands down, there's no question that I will do better under the crunch or getting something started than I will just watering it like plants or whatever.
All right. So a fair amount of introspection there. This is the part of leadership I'm good at. Crisis management, entrepreneurial, getting something started, but I'm not good at the ongoing transactional management of just keeping it going. How does that play into the way you lead Crafts Roofing and what you have for a management team around you?
One is I try to make sure that I'm held accountable on the nurturing things, the watering things
that you don't really want to do.
Yes. And if possible, I offload those and instead review them, because I know that I will get focused someplace else, or it's like, oh, well, we could go do this, or we're recreating some equipment right now in the way we want it to be because the marketplace isn't offering it to us. And I had to actually make myself step back. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, yeah, at the expense of what's not going to get done. So I had to sign it out. But, I know that my interest is always, what's new, what's next, what needs fixing, what can we buy? We bought a competitor just a couple years ago. That was a lot of fun. We just ran our company through a ESOP transition.
Yes.
That was a lot of fun. Tending the day-to-day. I mean, I do things like I have to calendar that for myself. So I get like little things that pop up on my calendar, like, have you sent your financials out, yet this month, or did you authorize this by now, that sort of thing.
Because the ongoing stuff just isn't of interest to you.
It gets displaced. Yeah. I mean, it is of interest because if you let it break, then it's bad. I've noticed that there are people in life who will let that ongoing stuff break so they have something to go fix. And I do not want to be the arsonist setting the fires that I can claim I was firefighting. That seems a pretty shallow sort of reward. So I tried to avoid that.
So again, a level of introspection that's necessary to figure out what piece of this you really focus on, how to have other people around you support that, and how to discipline yourself to do those things that aren't your natural inclination to focus on.
Absolutely. Discipline's a really good word for you to bring up, is that you've got to get this sorted out to help other people. So that includes getting your stuff done right, on time, well explained. We moved to an open book situation a number of years ago. And that was as much to share, but it was also that it forced me to have to explain what everything was and be ready to answer the questions. I think you might agree with me that nothing teaches you a harsher lesson than having to actually teach the subject matter.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely, sir. And
so it's suddenly like, well, I was talking about this ratio and all this stuff. And the banker guy was like talking about this and that. And I kind of remember it from back at business school, but I blew through that. No, you better know it.
If you're going to stand in front of a group and explain it.
Explain it. And, here's where we're at on this. And, here's where our stock turn is and all this, that you better have it down.
And now, a few words about some of the programs and services offered by the UW-Oshkosh College of Business.
Powerfully positioned, strategically designed, results-driven. That's what sets the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Master of Business Administration program apart in Northeast Wisconsin. Our MBA professional program offers flexible course options to meet the needs of working professionals seeking career advancement. Take the courses 100% online, in person during the evenings in Appleton or Oshkosh, or a combination of both, and earn your MBA in as little as 2 years. No GRE or GMAT required. It's time to achieve more with a graduate degree from UW-Oshkosh. Visit uwo.sh/MBA to learn more. That's uwo.sh/MBA. Visit today.
Let's go back to the open book. You're leading the organization, historically a family-owned business. You could share all or none of the data about how the organization's doing. Why was it in your mind the right leadership thing to do to have open books, to share the finances?
My belief is that by sharing where we were arriving financial, it put in perspective the decisions that we were going to undertake and what the results of those decisions were. It also shared the successes when we were succeeding and the, in a hopefully not too horrible way, a little bit of the anxieties when something wasn't working. We had gone through a period where the financials were extremely tightly held and manipulated while they were tightly held. So I don't think people really trusted what they were told. I know I had arrived at that point where I didn't necessarily trust my predecessor and what I was told.
What the numbers were.
And
from your perspective, it's important to have reliable, honest numbers that are shared.
As part of doing this process, did scare people.
Go on.
Construction, particularly outdoor construction like we're doing, has a cycle to it. And the beginning of the year, because we're on a calendar year, we're rebuilding equipment. We can't field our crews because of weather. The fixed overhead and the maintenance side tends to swamp any amount of sales you have and create particularly a profit curve that ends up looking like a big S. During the year, you kind of dig a trench at the beginning, much like a farmer. You're putting it in the ground and all this sort of thing.
Healthy way to look at it. I'm sowing seeds.
I was used to it, having looked at it. But when we shared it, I had people that were like, you could see they were nervous about it. So I had to do a lot of educating that this is better than what we forecast, and this is the way it works right now. And this is a farmer type thing. This is just like when they plow the field, when they put the fertilizer, when they put the seeds in, all this expense goes out and they don't get anything to over here when it's at harvest.
Okay, interesting. You've clearly thought a lot about being a leader. Is leadership more of an art or a science? We have this debate.
Well, what have you decided? Because I would have said both. I think there is a certain bit of artistry because you're going to respond somewhat emotively and somewhat intellectually in very rapidly changing situations, lends itself more to creativity, the artistry sort of thing. And some of it is absolutely pure science, is that, if they don't want to, if you actually took what we consider subjective and created a objective scaling for it, you would say this is an ineffective person because their motivation's way down here, where I need to be up here. The numbers don't lie when you do the financials, so I'm going to say it's a mix of both.
I agree. I think of it as the science underlies the art, that you need the science. I think of it almost like a great art, Leonardo da Vinci, that great understanding of science, great understanding of colors and the science behind all that in the human body, but actually converting that into a painting, that's an art. But if you don't have the science behind it, you don't know what the muscle's like, you don't know how to draw so I think it was both.
I would absolutely agree.
And not that I compare myself to Leonardo da Vinci, but I think it is a combination. What has failure taught you? I assume you failed at something.
Absolutely. I've walked out of many situations, my tail between my legs, and that didn't work out so good. Failure, if you let it overwhelm you and consume you, is not very useful. But if you take the time to analyze why did I not measure up to others' expectations? It's the basis for like a huge amount of learning you can do. Everything from like, don't do that again, to, well, why did they perceive it this way? I thought I was doing, I thought I was meeting the goals. Perception, particularly if you're working in a large organization, plays a good part in your actual performance. You can actually turn in magnificent numbers, but if others resent it or downplay it or feel it's unearned, they'll find some way to. I'm going to give you an example.
Please.
I was seconded for a while to another field office, working for another special agent in charge. And this fellow would take my reports and then take a page or two out of them and retype them, putting his name in them as if he had done them. And then he would do the front cover and send them in as his own work. This irritated the heck out of me because I'm sort of like, I'd done a couple things which I thought I should at least gotten like, hey, that's all right.
A little something there.
That's all right. It wasn't like they owed me anything, but just like an acknowledgement. And it said, it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. So I finally figured it out because I went and looked at the file copies. I'm like, oh, this guy changed this stuff, and I didn't even exist. I did all the field work and
right,
all the analysis and actually because a lot of what we did was you couldn't distribute it out. Had to do the physical, actual typing and preparation. And he went mucked with this stuff. So I had started getting people that I was interviewing, because a lot of these were interviews, to mention me by name. So they would suddenly say, well, Special Agent Weinert. And I probably at that point technically wasn't a special agent, but, it was fine. They could get away with that.
They didn't know it.
And this is what I thought when I saw that. And, or they mentioned me, well, Steve, I thought this is what was happening. Well, now suddenly this guy changed one report. And I got called into the commander over the whole thing. I have this report, and it says that it's this other fellow's report, but your name's all in it. I said, no, I did that report. I did all those interviews. Oh, that's fine. I was sent on my way, and that was the last this guy ever messed with my report. These things happen. If the organization doesn't support you, these things will happen. So you have to be aware of it, and you have to figure out a way when you're working with people to support them, to let them take their victory laps when they're earned. But if it's a failure one, to let them figure out how they can improve themselves. There were things that I did that, really got me chastised. It was like, you really shouldn't do that again. But I learned my lesson from it. It's just like, okay, I can put that in my toolbox, and we're not going to, go there again.
It sounds like a couple times in your career, you were comfortable coloring outside the lines.
What lines? What lines? The lines are a perception that others have put down for you, not what's really there.
From a leadership perspective, your perception is that sometimes you need to do that.
With care, yes.
With care.
With care.
Okay.
With care. If you use the judgment thing, would you be comfortable if this had happened and it affected you and you're comfortable with that? You're probably in a pretty good place.
Okay.
Coloring outside the lines.
Good.
I mean, think about this is, there's this coloring book and, people are going to color in the lines. Would you really rip those pages out and save those as something you treasure or whatever? It's like, no. But if somebody took the same coloring book and said, well, but I can do this. And, I see this part here is that wasn't just a sun. That's a kaleidoscope sun. And, I can bring a little bit of this feel to over here, and they color way outside the lines. You might end up with something you want to put up on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. Coloring outside the lines is often where the most interesting stuff happens.
But you can get in trouble too.
Well, yeah. It's a trade-off in life. What do you look for in someone to be in a leadership role? What tells you that young person might make it moving up the hierarchy?
What I've done is I've looked for some core value things. In other words, how do I feel that they feel about the decisions they're making? Are they conscientious about it? And then I try and put them in positions where they get to make increasing amounts of decisions and let them grow towards that. I have one young fellow who I don't believe when he left school that he perceived himself as taking a leadership role is doing just super. And but it's been step by step of
helping him through.
And it's not really like cultivating, but letting like, here, go handle this, or tell me what you're going to do with this. Tell me what you're going to do with this situation. And then, they start working it out, and you're like, yeah, that's a really good idea.
Teaching him how to do the right thinking so that he can draw his own conclusions.
Yeah. And he's a major part of the team that would let me walk away if I needed to walk away.
Okay. Well, talk about that in terms of not the walking away, but the evolution. The leadership responsibilities you had early on when you were first in a leadership role, the leadership responsibilities now have evolved. How have you evolved your leadership in response to the changing needs?
My leadership has evolved from a reactive, initial, to any situation that came up, I reacted to it.
Problem came up, you responded,
fixed it,
move on.
To now it's maybe more contemplative. So a problem comes up, like, okay, who's best to fix this? So then try and get them involved. Do I need to? I will say I always hold that ace or whatever. If it's something like safety, or somebody's going to be hurt, or there's
ethical issue,
ethical, legal, moral thing. I want to say I'm like the seatbelt that clamps them to the seat, but we're not going there.
Right.
We're not.
There's a line, and
there's some
you're in charge, and it ain't going to happen.
We're just not going to do that, and that's about the only time where a more dictated response will come out of me. But more, I'm going to try and find out, who should fix it, help them get started on it, help them collect the information, prod them along if I don't think it's going quick enough, because some things need to happen pretty quick, and then let them tell me what they think the solution is and try and coach them towards an acceptable solution.
So early on in your career was more proactive, maybe because the needs of the organization and the role was such, but in the role you're in now, you need to be more contemplative and more thinking things through from a bigger picture process perspective.
I also changed.
Go on.
So I feel now that I felt initially that I needed to immediately respond to any, if it came my way, it's like,
that's what a leader did.
3 times 17, 50, just boom, you had to do it. To now, no, I need these people to sort this out. The strong realization that I'm paying them very good wages. I should get some very good results from that. And I shouldn't stand in their way. So one of the things I can do is mentor, listen, evaluate, reassure them that, you're doing the right thing, empower them.
You got a lot going on. Running this organization, making this acquisition, you're active in your community, et cetera. How do you make time for Steve? How do you take care of Steve?
I go to either the pool or gym every day. So
and that's an absolute.
That's an absolute. It's a rare day that I don't go. Here I am in the pool, doing my laps. I found a waterproof MP3 player. So I'm listening to Johnny Cash or something like this, just zoning out, just knocking off some laps, or on a treadmill or on a stepper or something. And that's one of my times. And then at the end of the day, I almost always spend a bit of time reading.
Okay.
I think I've done 9 books so far this year. And usually I read about 40 books or so a year.
So I hear you're programming him in time to take care of yourself physically and intellectually.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What's the hardest part of being a leader?
Being patient, letting people work through something where you've already seen the answer.
You've been there, so you know the right answer. Let's just do it.
It's like, and so being patient, being generous when their solution's not fully optimized.
Okay.
And being able to accept that, well, that gets us like 95% of the way there. Let's not undermine them by saying
you didn't make the last 5.
You didn't make
celebrate the first 95.
Yeah, celebrate the first part. That's a good way of putting it. I like that. I'll remember that.
Flip it. What's the most fun part of being a leader?
I love watching them exceed their expectations. one of the things, I have a bonus program for different parts of the organization. Well, initially when I set it up, I did all the calculations, all this sort of thing. I mean, I had the accountants do this and I did the rest. That was not as much fun as I make them do it all themselves, the team that's going to be rewarded.
Right.
So suddenly you see them and they get the little smile, the bigger smile, like, we did this. We not only hit our goal, but we're going to get those bogeys, bonus things, and watching them succeed. It's a kind of a strange thing to see. I've had a number of people leave the organization because they grew past what we had to offer. I mean, from the organization point, you're feeling a little bit sad, like, oh, now I got to fill this spot and I got to go recruit a bunch of people and start some people, through. But you also, from a personal point, it's like, wow, they really have done it. They're being recognized by something that we don't have a spot for being able to really do the stuff that I think was in them all the time.
It just almost watching your reaction, I think I'm hearing that for you, leadership in many ways is a lot of fun from a people development perspective, as much or more than a making money perspective.
If you treat the people right, the money seems to come. We do well. I don't have any horribly extravagant needs. So we're able to reinvest, back into the organization. This whole ESOP thing, when my individual family did not necessarily want to follow my footsteps, I looked to my next family, and that's my work family. And like, yeah, these folks can do it. Was that probably the highest money amount I could get out? No, probably not. But it was the highest reward point I could arrive at.
I think that's the end that we ought to take away on this, that if you treat your people right, the money will follow.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's a fascinating leadership perspective. Steve, thank you very much. I appreciate your willingness to be here, spend some of your valuable time with us today on this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Dale.
And thank you all for listening to another It's Time podcast, a production of the UW-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs. Thank you for listening.
It's Time is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs in association with Venture Project Studios. Executive producer, Aaron J. Armstrong. Host, Professor Dale Feinauer. Creative director, Madison Potratz. Director of photography, Elazar Kloon. Audio and video editor, Elazar Kloon. Marketing strategy, Tara Larson. Social media, Anwar Mahana. A special thanks to L Creative, TopView Media, Michael Patton, and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs.